To you in Europe, welcome to everyone who has joined us for this interim report on the Philippine Elections 2022 by the International Observer Mission. A special welcome to the media workers present. My name is Peter Murphy, Chairperson of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. I'm speaking to you from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation in Sydney, Australia. I will be your moderator on this Zoom webinar, during which we will have short 3 to 5 minute presentations from some of the IOM commissioners and a representative of our partner, Contra Daya, followed by question and answer. So especially for the media workers, but for everyone, if you have a question, you can put it to the panel. Please use the question and answer function in Zoom, type it in there, or raise your hand at the time you want to ask the question. Our panel members are Ms. Séverine de Lavallee, an IOM Commissioner, and Nicolo Green, Deputy from the Belgian Parliament, Dr. Maria Lourdes Harabe, a convener of Contra Daya, and Reverend Dr. Professor Chris Ferguson, an IOM Commissioner and former General Secretary of the World Communion of Reformed Churches. The Philippine Elections 2022 International Observer Mission was recommended by the Investigate PH in its final report in September 2021. Those Investigate PH reports last year exposed a dire situation for the Filipino people at all levels of their human rights and anticipated that the violations would continue and likely intensify in these elections. Investigate PH and ICHRP were themselves red tagged for carrying out the investigation and publishing those reports. And we anticipated severe security challenges in mounting an international election observer mission. However, we were able to launch it in March this year. We were able to team up with Contra Daya and the United Church of Christ of the Philippines and deploy international observers to many regions of the country during the campaign and on election day. We managed to protect their security, and so none were harassed by the NTF-ALCAC or the Bureau of Immigration. The interim report, like the 6 IOM bulletins, is presented by our commissioners, who are all based outside the Philippines, and the identities of our observers are protected in the report. The IOM plans to publish a final report on June 28, just prior to the inauguration of President-elect Marcos. This will provide more analysis of the election outcome, the character of the incoming administration, and recommendations for action on human rights by the international community. So now we can move to the panel. And I would like to first introduce Ms. Séverine de Lavallee from the Belgian Parliament to report on the findings of our IOM. Séverine is one of the IOM commissioners. She's worked with civil society on human rights for 20 years, including 2 years at the Belgian Red Cross as a project manager in Congo, Kinshasa. In 2018, she was elected as a councillor of the Forest for Ekolo, and in the national elections of 2019, she was also elected a member of the Chamber of Representatives for Ekolo. So thank you very much, Séverine. Please take the microphone.
Thank you, Peter, for this introduction, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share with you some of the main findings related to this report. So good morning and good afternoon and maybe good night for all of you. I will focus only on the main findings brought by our observers and local partners. As Peter has just said, it's Contra Daya and the United Church of Christ in the Philippines. First, I would like to stress a few general observations. We have to underline that the last Philippine election was marred by widespread irregularities and violence, which undermined the democratic process. The elections took place in the most repressive context since the time of dictator Marcos. The Duterte government orchestrated state terror marshalling the entire machinery of the state, including the judiciary, the military and the police, the departments of education, social services, and local government in a war on dissent, which continued through the entirety of the election campaign. Our observers and local partners were witness to ongoing violations of the democratic process across the Philippines. They noted problems with respect to political killings, shootings, abductions, death threats, political arrest, harassment and surveillance of candidates and supporters, large-scale web tagging, widespread vote buying, media manipulation and repression, fake news and harassment of journalists by the Marcos campaign. It was widely reported that more than 1,800 voting machines malfunctioned or failed, affecting 1.1 million voters. Contradaya reported 31 incidences of vote buying witnessed on election day. In central Luzon, the IOM reported testimony of vote buying as well as the National Capital Regional, where a local aspirant confirmed that never in the history of that city was vote buying been so rampant as in 2022, where one candidate was spending 5 to 7 million pesos a day. Now, I would like to share some findings regarding the use of violence during the whole process. There was extensive violence throughout the campaign by private militias and military groups associated with the Duterte government. The IOM started reporting on election-related violations of human rights since early March this year. The first political killings related to the elections took place in Sorsogon on January 15. In Ilocos Sur, 5 rounds of grenades were fired into a municipal hall, injuring 9 people, prompting an exchange of gunfire with the police the day before the election. Allegations of vote buying also triggered a shooting incident that left 4 dead on May 7. On election day, there were deaths in polling stations in Llano del Sur, where 6 people were killed and 2 others injured in the election violence. Regarding the red tagging practices, we can underline that it was a common practice during the campaign, largely by the state's military and right-wing candidates, in order to vilify opposition candidates. This is an extreme form of disinformation, which was used against progressive candidates and the main opposition presidential candidate, Leni Robredo. Fake news stories appeared stating her campaign advisor was former CPP chairperson Joma Season. Another example, Robredo was red-tagged in Leyte on March 28, just before a campaign event began. Signs linking her to the CPP, the NDFP, and the New People's Army were hung on trees around the government center in Palo City. Tarpaulins, posters, and flyers demonizing progressive candidates were found by IOM delegates in Cagayan, Metro Manila, Pampanga, and Lugana, near or even within polling centers, a clear case of illegal campaigning. Contradaya has identified the armed forces of the Philippines as a key source of retagging and disinformation during campaign. Regarding disinformation, we could also add that disinformation and fake news were endemic during the whole campaign. On the eve of elections, fake reports were circulated that all Maccabean bloc candidates and party list groups had been disqualified by the Comelec. The IOM Central Luzon mission identified the spread of fake news through online platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok as a major threat to the integrity of Philippine democracy and the electoral process. They mention in particular the proliferation of false reports and information about Bang Bang Marcos and the history of his family, ranging from characterizations of the martial law period as a golden age to historically dubious account to the provenance of the Marcos wealth. Voters were denied access to reliable information, access to the voting places without intimidation or a credible vote counting system. So in conclusion, regarding all these prevailing conditions, we can affirm that election of May 9th this year did not meet the standard of free and fair. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Severine. Thank you. I now introduce Dr. Maria Lourdes Harabe, one of the conveners of Contradaya, to comment on the election results and the post-election calls to resist voter manipulation, fraud, and misinformation. Malu is a social worker, teacher, and advocate. She is currently an associate professor at the Lamantasan ng Lungsod ng Maynila. She has over 20 years of experience in education, community organizing, and issue advocacy, social welfare and social protection, disability rights, women and gender development, children and youth welfare, and volunteer service management. Malu served as an Undersecretary of the Department of Social Welfare and Development from 2016 to 2018. Before she joined the DSWD, Malu worked in Miriam College as a faculty member and administrator. She was also a senior lecturer at the UP Open University Faculty of Management and Development Studies. Malu is engaged in direct advocacy around issues involving human rights, accountability, and people's welfare. Please welcome Dr. Harabe.
Thank you, Peter, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good day to each and every one of us. I'd like to thank the organizers of this webinar for inviting us and pitching in our observations and the elections that was just concluded. Just allow me to share my screen. This is very brief. I have a very brief PowerPoint presentation.
You should be able to share your screen now. Oh, there we go.
Yes. Can you see it now? Are you able to
yes,
see my
yes, we can see.
Okay, I'll just... Okay. So my task is to share with you, from our perspective, what happened in the Philippine elections, in the May 9, 2022 elections. Okay, Contradaya, together with Vote Report PH, gathered reports involving machine errors, illegal campaigning, vote buying, and red tagging. As of today, Contradaya was able to gather more than 9,000 reports and was able to verify 2,927. By verified, we mean there are evidences supporting these reports. And of this number, the election-related reports number 2,683, campaign-related 224, and vote counting machine errors 1,318. Okay. So for the machine failures, make significant percentage of election incidents. What does this mean? Machines rejecting the ballots, failing to issue receipts, or breaking down completely, resulting in long lines and significant delays in voting. In fact, voters could be seen waiting in line for VCM replacement, vote counting machine replacement, and SD cards to arrive. In some places, some people were lining up for more than 12 hours. No? In fact, they were able to cast their ballot the following day. Okay? And some were forced to conduct manual voting in view of machine replacements. Okay? Okay. I'm just showing to you the slide. Contradaya received reports of illegal campaigning, vote buying, disinformation, and red tagging. This proves that despite the statements made by COMELEC to the contrary, the 2022 elections were plagued with incidents of fraud and disinformation. Okay. Contradaya maintains that the massive amount of reports serves to prove failure of the automated election system in guarding the sanctity of the ballot. It is actually difficult for voters to be confident in election proceedings marred by machine errors and breakdowns, as these cast doubt on the capacity of the machine to count their votes. This can be attested by reports of voters refusing to hand over their ballots to election officials, choosing instead to wait for replacement VCMs until the early hours of the morning to be sure that their votes are cast. There were also multiple reports of gaps in election procedures, such as incorrect manner of storage of ballots and receipts. The proprietary source code of the VCMs and the lack of genuine source code review process cast more doubt on the accuracy of the election results. As the software and hardware of the machines are both owned and protected by Smartmatic, it is difficult to completely vet the process by which the machines count the votes. No? Right from the start, KD or Contradaya has remained critical of the conduct of automated elections in the country for its lack of transparency and accountability. The COMELEC must replace the current automated election system with one that is transparent, open source, and locally made. An election system that maximizes local talent and allows for greater public scrutiny will allow voters to be confident that their vote has been correctly cast and counted. So from our end, we can say, if we are asked, was there election fraud? Yes, there was election fraud. And these are the points that we would like to raise to everyone who's witnessing this event. There's lack of transparency in the automated election system. There is lack of expert oversight and measures to ensure integrity. There's also a problem in the COMELEC's attitude, no? One that does not, one that is not accountable and would downplay all the complaints hurled against them. There was massive, systematic, and sustained disinformation favoring Marcos Jr. to deceive the electorate. There was rampant and unchecked vote buying, although we brought this to the attention of the COMELEC ahead of time. There was intimidation, red tagging, or terrorist labeling and other forms of harassment against the opposition. So it is no wonder that despite what they claim as a huge margin or the win with the huge margin, people are not confident. No? So the following day, various groups actually trooped to the COMELEC to express dismay. And during the start of the national canvassing, the same groups, and in fact, various groups actually went to the PICC, to express protest, saying that the 2022 election by far is the most, how do you say that? By far, riddled with cheating, fraud, and red tagging was to a very, very, how do you say that? Escalated during this 2022 elections. So, but I guess we have to also share with you, not just what happened during the 2022 elections, but why we are here in the first place. Why did it come to this stage? And so we are offering some notes, no, to help us in analyzing the situation we are in. Okay. And the Marcos restoration is actually the ironies, no, of history. How Marcos was propelled, no, and the Marcos family rehabilitated, no, and was brought to power once again. First, there is a false historical narrative and disinformation that is systematically crafted in social media and abetted by an educational system that has glossed over the harsh realities of the dictatorship era. A simplified political messaging with mass appeal. Number two, there is support by the country's most powerful, influential political families or the political dynasties from north to south and the oligarchs. Number three, there's a fatally divided political opposition against a unified dynastic bloc. So if we're saying that the unity of Marcos Duterte, together with all the political dynasties from north to south, the political opposition is not united, or there is, how do you say that? There's division, no, in this political opposition. Fourth, there's huge financial resources to buy support from both voters and local government officials. And fifth, red tagging and anti-communist scare against both progressive and individuals and groups and Robredo herself. And sixth, a partisan COMELEC and non-transparent automated election system run by a non-accountable foreign entity, the Smartmatic. So in this case, we are in the situation right now. It seems despondent or maybe hopeless, no? But then again, we must continue to push back. We must stand our ground. And what can we do? What do we have to do? Okay. From Contra Dias, and we're saying that we should hold COMELEC, Smartmatic, and its logistics provider, F2, accountable for the widespread failure of elections. We should also continue to fight against disinformation, historical denialism, and distortion. We should also find creative means to raise the political awareness of the hundreds of thousands who were mobilized and develop these into new democratic forces. And finally, let us continue forming movement for civil liberties, human rights, social justice, economic upliftment of the poor, the marginalized, and movement for national sovereignty. I end my presentation here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Malu. We will move on now to the final panelists, and then we'll have the Q&A session. So final panelist speaking here is Reverend Dr. Professor Chris Ferguson. He's been asked to put the interim report findings into a broader political context. Chris is an IOM commissioner and is a minister of the United Church of Canada and the recent General Secretary of the World Communion of Reformed Churches. He supports victims of violence and promotes justice, peace, and human rights as part of his ecumenical advocacy. So over to you, Chris. Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, I want to give a great word of thanks to and support and solidarity to all the people of the Philippines who exercised their democratic rights in a situation that was hostile to their own expression of political will. and to express solidarity with all those who were victims of intimidation, abuse, human rights violations, and outright violence and loss of life. And to lift up as well the solidarity and determination of the observer teams and those on the ground who have worked hard to make sure that the truth would be out and to support the people in their efforts. The context here is this election is in a global context of massive double standards about the rise of authoritarian governments who are prepared to support the agendas of powerful nations like the United States and others. And these authoritarian and fascist regimes, of which the Duterte regime was an example, have been able to operate with the compliance and being aided and abetted by international timidity and a lack of will to hold them accountable, as Duterte has instituted a rule that has been based on state terror, the co-opting and militarization of police and the military and judiciary forces. In what we see here, therefore, in this specific election, the context is that the human rights abuses are an extension of the repressive regime and the suppression of dissent and the imposition of a political agenda on the Filipino people in conformity with the foreign policy objectives of governments like the United States and economic interests of massive transnational capital. So in this larger context, we see this election reflecting past, present, and future. That it was is on the one hand both an extension of, an example of, or the fruit of the very politics of repression of dissent that we witnessed under Duterte, but it is also an election that was geared to guarantee the continuation into the future of that rule by the billionaire and elitist class, and at the same time protect the Duterte government against accountability in the present and the future. So what's at stake here in terms of the larger political situation is that we are clear that not only was the election about extending the rule of the few over the many and using illegitimate and violent means to do so, but it also is a systematic erosion of any accountability to standards of international law, international humanitarian law, and to human rights law within the country. And it is also a furthering and a deepening of the successful strategy of the militarization of the police and the interference of the military in the everyday life of the Filipino people. So on the one hand, the election was an extension of the Duterte era rule, and on the other hand, the result is to protect Duterte against any accountability and therefore further deepen the delinking of authoritarian governments from any international accountability. And as I say, this has been aided and abetted by international timidity. Therefore, the important takeaway here in looking at this in global context is that it is extremely important not only for the people of the Philippines, but for all people, that this three-pronged approach to the erosion of international accountability must be stopped, and that the Filipino people cannot be left abandoned by the international community to regimes and powerful economic and social interests that are operating with impunity and further militarizing and repressing the daily lives of people. This means, I think, that the processes that we have been seeing at work, including in the ICC, the United Nations Human Rights Council, and nationally based efforts like the Magnitsky-style laws that all efforts need to be redoubled to absolutely assure that that we see this as a process of stopping impunity in order to stop the killings and stop the repression, not only in the Philippines, but to press for a reinvigoration of international moral courage in terms of the establishment of a rule of law that protects people and their democratic prerogatives. So I think that that the important understanding here is that the context has to do with the election process itself. No government, our effort should be to make sure that no government, no members of civil society accept and declare this election free and fair, absent full investigation of the human rights violations that are evidenced in this interim report, and that methods of accountability are measured, and that there is again a really reinforcement of people's rights to determine their own political future, and that this campaign of intimidation and state-sponsored terror has to be brought to an end through international accountability.
Thank you very much, Chris. Okay, so we've got some big challenges presented to us from this information and the views of the panelists. We'll now move to the question and answer segment. I have got 3 questions in the Q&A box, and at least one person's got their hand raised. So I will just start with the first question there. This comes from Uriel Killinging. His question to Severin: what should be the requirements of a fair and democratic election? If you are to rate the May 9 elections on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 as the highest, what would be your rating?
Thank you for the question. I'm not sure that I will be perfectly accurate in my answer, but maybe the first bit of the question, what should be necessary for fair election? In my point of view, a fair election would be based on equal chances for all candidates to have security and direct access to a fair information on their program and on the input they want to share with the population. So they have to be protected to make sure that they will face no injuries, no violence for themselves and the whole team. Second, to make sure that the information that are related in the media and in online are strictly related to the truth, and that they are access to media to express if there are fake news going around. And obviously, and it has been related just earlier, make sure that all the polling election areas are secured and highly functioning. It seems to be a very basic answer, but we are all facing this kind of issue in democratic countries, but clearly in the Philippines, these basic necessities were not meet. So that's probably for the first bit of answer. The second, it's a bit too early for me to put the Philippines on a scale between 1 to 10. I'm sorry for this. So I would rather not answer that question. I'm sorry. I would not answer that question because I may not have from Belgium enough information yet to answer properly. So maybe someone who is on the field would be more able than myself to answer that question.
Thank you very much, Severine. Perhaps we can go to this next question. This is from Siegfried de Duro. Do we have a smoking gun proving actual technical manipulation of the automated elections? Perhaps this question could go to Malu.
Yes, thank you, Peter, and thank you to the question, Siegfried. Actually, the very fact that we have not been given access access to understand how the vote counting machines work. In fact, there were several times that we would, ask COMELEC to include us, to explain to us, the whole process by which this actually operates. Unfortunately, up to the very last day before the elections happened, we were not granted that. So it's the basic, in essence, not having access to transparency mechanisms, transparency measures, it would be difficult for us to understand how cheating could happen inside the machine. Okay, so number two, precisely because we were not given an access, we were not able to involve experts, so there was no expert oversight. Okay. But also let us put this, let's put things in perspective. So it's not just the machine, but actually the entire condition where this is actually happening. Okay, it is not just the machine per se, but the entire ecology or environment that this is taking place, this is happening. What do I mean by that? The very fact that there was massive disinformation favoring Marcos Jr. and putting a lot of candidates, including Leni Robredo, to a huge disadvantage. And this has been going on for a very, very long time. In fact, the Marcoses started doing this when they came back in the 1990s. And, this went on. So the very fact that this has been abetted, and the very fact that no less than the government is also party to this disinformation campaign. Also, the massive vote buying, illegal campaigning that has been going on for a long time, for which we have been calling the attention of COMELEC way ahead. And of course, I don't know, so the response is, if not zilch, it's very unsatisfactory. Okay. And of course, the continuing red tagging, the continuing political harassment. So all in all, without perhaps without having to find out or having to agree on a specific situation like a smoking gun, we can say that the very context, the very nature by which this election happened, there is electoral fraud. There is massive disinformation, illegal vote buying, illegal campaigning, illegal campaigning, red tagging. Put them together in this kind of environment, Okay, so without having to point at a specific smoking gun, throwing a stone, like particularly for these vote counting machines. I guess we can all agree on that there was electoral fraud that took place in this 2022 elections.
Thank you, Malu. The iChirp Global asked to also respond to that question. So who is that who would like to pick that up? Maybe that comment's withdrawn then. Uriel asked if anyone else would like to rate the election 1 to 10 from the panel. Maybe Malu, maybe Chris.
0. Maybe it's okay. Let me just put it this way. If you will ask voters, especially the ones who experienced that ordeal, and they weren't able to vote right on time, and they were already seeing the transmission of votes, vote counting by every 30 minutes. So we've spoken with them, and they said it's so heartbreaking. Okay, that was how they felt. Lining up, queuing up 10 kilometers. We actually have a video of that. People queuing up 10 kilometers outside the polling precincts. Okay, so just imagine the the ordeal they had to go through, and you will ask them if they will rate the elections 1 to 10. I would say very sorry. It's hard to be confident. It's hard to be confident in this election. So maybe I'm not inclined to give a score.
Okay, Chris, quickly. Yep.
Yeah, I think the with all due respect to the answer of the question, I think we have to say that the reason we're all hesitant is it's the wrong question. That there is so much substantial evidence that the basic conditions for people to able to express their democratic prerogatives were so clearly absent that we don't get to score it. This is an election that is so tragically flawed that that it isn't like is it very bad or a little bit bad. It does not meet the democratic standards, period. And it seems to me that a further proof of this is that there's no scoring to be done until actually all these various serious reports, including of deaths, shooting, and so on, are actually investigated and held accountable. Absence the accountability, this is a 0.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I'm going to just read a bit of a comment from the chat. So this is from Minette. It was an honor for us to host a team of observers from Canada and Europe. They were there for a week. They witnessed the actual election as well as post-election. We knew from the start that the election will be full of cheating. The fraud was faster now because of the advancement of technology. There was another comment from another person. I just don't want to identify people too much, just saying thank you for their guide to their observer group who were also in the countryside. I've got a question from Gil Beringer. Alan Cayetano, not surprisingly, says the Filipino people should give the Marcos regime a chance. Why should they be given a chance, given they have never given the Filipino people a chance, including BBM lying about the golden age, violating the law by not paying his taxes, and has been determined to hold on to the plundered billions, to name just a few of his anti-people actions. Isn't peaceful resistance from day one justified and necessary? So I don't know, who would like to go there? Severine.
No, obviously, there is at this point no reason why the Filipino people should give any trust to this new profile in the government. There's no reason why, and obviously resistance and mobilization should begin day one, because without the mobilization of the population, these people will be able to do massive frauds and massive violence for the next following years. They've been facing that for so many years in the Philippines. They know better. They know better that there are no hope that is linked to these new elected, so-called elected people. So obviously they should be on the street as they've been doing these last decade, and make their voice heard, and probably even more than before, to make sure that their voice are heard outside the Philippines, because this remained a huge challenge for the Filipino people and civil society, is to be heard directly to Europe also, because as you probably know, we don't talk enough about the Philippines in Europe. So I think the mobilization will be absolutely necessary from this day onwards.
Okay, thanks, Severine. Chris, Malu, you would also like to comment after? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Chris.
If you want, please let Malu go first, please.
Okay. Malu?
Okay. Thank you, Chris. I guess we have already made our selves clear. So we said there's no honeymoon. There's no honeymoon period. In fact, we told them, we told Marcos Jr.'s camp, that the first 100, please expect growing resistance, from people, especially because we believe that he was able to win this presidency because of all the factors that I mentioned earlier. He poisoned this huge win that he's saying is actually a product of disinformation, massive disinformation that took place many years ago. He was supported by political elites, political clans. Highly favoring him was, of course, Duterte, Duterte himself. So, yes, he won. The margin was there, 16 million over more than the votes of Leni Robredo. But I wouldn't say that this has been legitimately acquired, because this is a product of poisoning the minds of people because of this massive disinformation campaign. Number two, he did not give us any platform,
I think Malu is frozen for now. Let's perhaps Chris, if you could take over.
Very briefly, for political purposes, I agree with all that's been said about the need for media. But if you wanted to frame it, I think in terms of political demands, to say, yes, this government should be given the chance that within their first 10 days to free all political prisoners, but particularly de Lima. They should be given a chance to call for an international independent investigation into the Duterte regime, and they should be given a chance to hold the government accountable for the excesses of the war on terror, the war on the Moro people, and the war on dissent. They should be given that chance within the first 10 days. Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I've got a question from Hannah Wolf to Malu. Do you have any insights whether there were any differences in how disinformation influenced the urban and the rural population? What role did the dynasties play in comparison to earlier elections? And this is like another question too, comparing, say, 2016 to 2022.
Okay, we have not made any, thorough analysis on that. But what I can say from what we have gathered so far is that for most in urban in poor communities here in the urban centers, no, they have limited access, no, to very thorough news agencies. So they would right away the things that they could actually access right away would be Facebook and TikTok, no, mostly. And so I guess because they, this sound bites, no, and that they weren't able to really analyze, no, this news item, so their minds have actually been conditioned, poisoned, no, maybe that's the right word, no, poison, no. That this information has escalated, no, in the last couple of years, and so I guess it influenced, no, it actually played a role, no, why a lot of people voted for Marcos Jr. So that's escalating 2022. No? Of course, there was this information already, no, in 2016, and of course, I could say that it's more severe right now, because they have control over these government, no, even this government communication channels, no, are also peddling disinformation, peddling fake news, peddling lies and untruths.
Yeah. Okay. We've got a similar question from Ma Huidem. Are your observations of disinformation, fraud, vote buying, disenfranchisement of voters, military interference, etc., sufficient to declare a failure of elections? So in a way, it's just the same question, put a different way.
Well, yeah, the massive amount of reports that we receive, no, in our perspective, no, is enough for us to say that at least, no, the automated election system was a failure.
Yeah,
we can say that.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got a comment here from Melvin Nicholas. Hello from Geneva. Thanks to each of you for your efforts. I was representing the Liberal observers at the UN mission of the Philippines during the night shift. As what I had seen, the elections there were held very professionally. Sad to hear, it's just in those places that they uphold credibility. So it's a comment. And also from Uriel, he's saying, my son and daughter-in-law experienced the long wait in Quezon City. They came to vote as early as 6 in the morning, but they didn't vote until after 9 o'clock at night. It's another comment. A question. Beyond the failure of the VCMs, the question is where the VCM issue is a cover to the manipulation of the results. I think, again, we've had the comment from the speakers on the panel on that. There's another comment from one of the hosts of the IOM in the provinces. For us, the grieving is done. It's time to link up with this broad movement against Marcos and Duterte and really work for genuine social transformation. There's a question from Mark. Can you please give us details of how your on-the-ground volunteers validated reports of cheating? Are there documentations of vote buying, for example, evidence gathered that could warrant the COMELEC to investigate? Let's now go back to Malu. And
yes, like what I said, no, we already received more than 9,000 reports, and of that number, we already validated close to 3,000, 2,900 something. No, when we say validating it, we definitely ask. We go back and forth. No, we have questions to ask. These people who are reporting to us, these incidents of fraud and violence. And then we would ask them if they could upload photos or videos. Okay. So, and of course, we were able to get the full report, the photos, the videos, and we have a repository. In fact, as we receive the reports, we have our tech people, no, our IT experts were able to put together, no, all these reports in a interactive map, no, so they could right away see where these reports are happening, no, and whether these reports have been verified. Okay, so yes, we did that, no, for this 2022 elections, and we are in the process of finalizing the report, and as soon as we finalize the report, we will send this, no, to, you know, concerned or relevant agencies for action.
Okay. Thank you very much, Malu and Chris and Severine. I think it's come to the hour, and although there's some more comments and questions, I think we'll wrap it up. I'll make the last comment come from Minette. She said, yes, we know what needs to be done. We expect it to be worse off now. It's going to be more repressive with the convergence of two corrupt and fascist dynasties, the Marcoses and the Dutertes. So I'd just like to say, this is the end of this event and the launching of this interim report. I really urge you to read it all. It's only 24 pages long, to share it and distribute it through your networks. And that on June 28, we will be launching a final report, which would give us, this is going to give us more time to consider all the information we have, plus what happens in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So that's June 28, so keep that in mind. Thank you very, very much to Severine, to Malu, and to Chris, to the media workers and all the participants in this launch at this dramatic time for the Filipino people. Keep safe. Thank you. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.